Some folks are like you and some that just won't. Some that stay real and some that just don't. Trying to fit in will only take you so far. You'll never find home trying to change who you are. So don't spend your whole life trying to be what you ain't. You can't hide your heart with a new coat of paint. You think they'll accept you, I promise they can't. So just be who you are, forget what they think. So just be who you are and forget what they think.
Welcome to Vet with a Mic, content driven by veteran issues. So today we're going to talk to a longtime friend of mine. We have been buddies since like 2013. He is an Army veteran, a Cav Scout, I believe. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he has found life after the uniform to be. Jamie, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Man, I can't complain. I'm telling you, though, as always, the holidays start to roll around and it's just madness. Everybody's got something who's making the mac and cheese? Who's doing the mashed potatoes? And it's it's like we do the same thing every year. It's like I make the mac and cheese. I don't know why. Why are we talking about this? But
I'm the lucky one. All I got to do is show up. So.
Man, you bring your appetite. That's great.
Right.
Yeah, man, you must be a terrible cook then. So it's
I don't know if it's that or I'm the only one single coming with no kids, so they're just happy.
Yeah,
they're just happy when that guy shows up.
Right? Yeah, you're the stray dog.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit because we've known each other for so long now. I think you were probably one of maybe two guys that I met that were from the uniform. It's almost as soon as I got up here.
It's funny how that works out, right?
Yeah. In one of the episodes I talked about, going to the gym because that was just my routine and just honing in on somebody that just happened to have any military affiliation clothing on. And it was like you and Derek. I think Derek introduced me to you.
Mm.
And, we've been pretty much buddies ever since. Yeah.
One of those things you can drop us in a room full of people and we're going to gravitate. It's just how it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm telling you, something about the veteran identity where you just, once you've been through shared misery, I suppose, there's a shorthand that we can all engage in.
Yeah.
So, I know you and I have talked probably 1,000 hours offline at some point, but for those of us who don't know who Jamie is, tell us a little bit about what your life in the uniform was like.
Went into the debt program in August of 2003 and January 2004 went to basic. Yeah, and with being a Cav Scout back then, it was still in Knox and in Fort Knox, and it's one station unit training, so all of us together. You don't get any breaks or anything like that, and through there, and then out to my first unit up at Fort Drum, and spent the next 5.5 years there.
Yeah.
So 2 tours to Iraq.
Yeah, I was about to ask you how many times over did you go?
Twice, 05, 06, that one was 12 months, and then 07, 08, that one was 15.
So you've had a lot of time over there in the sandbox.
More than some, less than others, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. So what year did you get out then?
I came home on terminal leave in April of 2009 and officially off active duty in May of 2009, and then honorable discharge in August of 2012.
Oh, okay. Nice. Now, what did you do right after you get out? Did you spend like a year like I did, just kind of refinding myself? I don't know. What else did you describe?
No. At that time, I was newly married, and I knew when I went in what career path I wanted to take when I got out, and I had applied for that kind of career path. It was in law enforcement, and they in 2001 I applied. They told me, "Hey, you don't have any college, you don't have any military time," and I was like, "Okay, I'll show you."
I'll
Uh,
fix that. Yeah.
I went in, and I mean, I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I would not have traded. I wouldn't trade that time for anything. It was one of the most important, enlightening, and problematic times. I mean,
Sure.
it's all in one. You can't really get
Yeah.
away from that. It's going to happen
You know, it's funny. I often described my time, especially in the desert, as cursed and blessed all within the same breath.
at the
You know?
same breath.
Yeah. Because I remember we were actually, I was escorting our OIC. I don't know. He just wanted to go on a mission before he rolled out into Iraq. And that's one of the things that I conveyed to him. I was like, sir, we are, because we see such beauty and just chaos at the same time. It's really difficult to tease out which is more important at times. But so you went into law enforcement.
Mm-hmm. When it got out in May of 09 and started July of 2009, I was at work.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So you had no downtime
No,
at all. Yeah.
long enough to buy a house and take a vacation, and then back to
Wow.
work.
Yeah. Like I said, I spent a year trying to find myself. I don't know where I was, but I was
That's-
trying to find myself. But so tell me, like you went into patrol. So you did patrol officer for a while.
I started off in the jail, did a year in there, and it's not uncommon to go that route, and then made it out onto patrol. Did patrol for about 5-6 years.
Yeah.
In that, did 2 years in crime suppression, and then ended up in narcotics.
Which is why this is what we're going to talk about is your time now being the drug cops.
That's right. And just I have to throw out a disclaimer. I'm sure you've had other guests that do the same thing. Just want to throw out there that yes, I am employed by a law enforcement agency. The views that I'm going to give during this interview is purely my views based on my training experience. It has nothing to do with the law enforcement agency that I'm employed by or anything like that. Just want to throw that out there.
Ass officially covered.
That's right.
Yeah.
CYA.
So, let's go into your work in narcotics, because I think this is a subject that uniquely affects veterans, because often we deal with all these aches and pains after the service, and we get prescribed medications to manage the pain. And sometimes it's managing emotional pain. Also, we're kind of self-medicating. And then this dragon hooks us quick. And so I just wanted you to generally talk about some of the things you've seen and what exactly you do in your job, because that's a little bit different than just like a normal narcotics officer. You deal with fatal overdoses. You try to track down the bad dope that's killing people. Yeah.
That's where I ended up. I've basically been doing that for about 2.5, maybe 3 years. It's kind of where I started in that. I did regular dope work for the first couple of years, and then into that. And I mean, you can see it. It's everywhere. The opioid epidemic. It's all over the news. It's all over politics and things like that. And kind of a touchy subject. It's one of those questions like, how do you answer the whose fault is it? And a lot of people who are not educated in it enough or don't have experience in it want to point at the people who have the addiction and say, it's all their fault. And once you gain that experience, you learn real quick that that is not necessarily the case, because a lot of times the doctors and the pain clinics and the hospitals, they're the ones that could ultimately be responsible for starting a person down that path.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that, because the old like way of thinking about things
Hmm.
was that there was like some personal defect, that these people were weak degenerates. And what we know now about how these chemicals interact with the brain
Hmm.
and how they alter behavior, there really is no you should just be man enough to quit
Yeah,
that really
doesn't
comes into
doesn't work
play.
that
Yeah.
way. Doesn't
Yeah.
work that way. It can, if you want to play the game of you should be man enough to quit. I mean, that's a
Hmm.
game that can kill you these days.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah.
So let's talk about some of the training you've had, because a lot of people think that law enforcement get a little bit of everything and a whole lot of nothing, but you've really had a pretty extensive training record at this point, just
Mhm.
dealing with drugs. So talk a little bit about what classes you've been through at this point. And
Um, where to start? It's
yeah, yeah.
uh, we have ongoing yearly training that gets updated that talks about the opioid crisis, the direction it's heading, where the
Mm,
drugs are coming from, all that kind of stuff. But the important things are like courses that are put on by state agencies and federal
mm,
agencies where you have doctors up there helping to explain how these things come about. People think that old school mentality of these are degenerates that are
mm,
addicts, and that isn't the case. I mean, you look at people who went from having everything being prescribed pain pills from a
mm,
doctor, and they're following the doctor's orders because that's everybody trusts the doctor, do what the doctor says. And when the opioid epidemic really got going, everything starts to get cut back because people, like the bad people, took advantage of that.
mm.
They profited from those sales and things like that. And then when the federal government starts cutting down and state government starts cutting down, it turns these people into um, using the addicts that start using the illicit street drugs,
Right.
because it's not their fault when they cut it back, when they can't get it
Mhm.
anymore.
Yeah.
But the doctors in these courses, they teach you the the thinking side of it, the brain side of it,
Yeah. Yeah.
because when you're using any kind of opioid or illicit street drug for that matter, you sever that connection between your frontal lobe and your reward center of the brain.
Mm.
And once you do that, the conscious make good decision portion of your brain is no longer in control.
Right.
It's your reward center. It's like having a little kid be in charge of everything. Little kid
Yeah.
wants the candy and everything, and they're going to go get it
Mhm.
if they can, because that's all they know. And when
Yeah.
that part of the brain's in charge, you can't. That's why grown-ups make decisions that you would expect to see from adolescents and children.
Yeah. Yeah. And we talked about in previous episodes just how complicated the brain is
Mhm.
anyway. But uh in previous episodes we talked about how the brain is kind of a system, and since it's powered by electricity too, one part of the brain can be activated, and usually the reciprocal part of the brain is
Mhm.
powered down. So you can see if all you're doing is really living in the reward center,
Mhm.
so to speak, that part is just staying humming the entire time, and other parts of the brain may be less
Mhm.
activated during those times of addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, it's you sever that connection. I've seen it talked about on morning
Hmm.
TV shows with doctors and everything else. It's that connections established in men. It's established later than it is in women. Women establish it
Go
earlier.
figure.
Yeah. Women can establish it as early as 22, 23.
Mhm.
Men usually don't establish that connection between the frontal lobe and the reward center until they're about 25, 26.
Yeah.
And when you are using illicit street drugs, opioids, things like that, you sever that connection. And scientific proof shows that it takes 100 days clean and sober to start to rebuild that connection. And
Now that brings us to our first problem,
mm,
because 100 days in a inpatient treatment facility, that's expensive.
it's hard to come by depending
Yeah.
on where you live at. I mean, where I'm at in Tennessee, it's just It's just really not there. They have it in some places, but if you don't have insurance, there's no way you're going to get it, because the only real way to treat that and to help rebuild that to where a person can rebuild their own life is 120-day inpatient rehab.
Mhm.
That's really the only way there is to treat that. And then once they even go through that, it's not like it's all magical going to go away.
Yeah.
That want, that drive, that desire is always going to be like that little tickle in the back of your mind.
Mhm.
Just like the first time you get into a firefight in combat, you get that adrenaline dump, especially when everything goes right.
Mhm.
You feel good, you win, you get that drive to want it,
Yeah.
And even after you're removed from that, that drive's still there. You may not necessarily act on it, but it's still there in the back of your mind.
So I want to backdate or backfill some things here.
Mhm.
So the brain has what we call neuroplasticity, meaning the brain is able to form new pathways once certain parts are severed. So what we're really talking about here is this 100 to 120 day kind of timeline is for the brain to form those new connections to the parts that have been disconnected from. And
Mhm.
we see this within traumatic brain injuries, stroke victims. The brain, even though there may be some damage that is beyond repair, so to speak, it forms new ways to connect those parts of the brain to each other again to restore function. So it really is, it's like healing a leg that's been broken. It takes a certain amount of time for that tissue to reconnect, both, of course, soft tissue and a bone structure. The brain is not unlike that. We have to give it time to reform the pathways necessary to reestablish function. So that's why it's almost now commonplace that we're not near meeting that 100 to 120 day mark, where
No.
most of the time we're hearing about inpatients that are 10, 14 days.
Mhm.
And that's
Up to
just,
up to
yeah,
30. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, because if they're underinsured or uninsured, they're paying out
Mhm.
of pocket for these facilities. And 30 days is, I guess, if you have some pretty good insurance.
Mhm.
But so it's just a complicated problem that just brings in another level of how it's impossible to really say that these people should just know better and use some inner courage and strength to get back to,
Yeah.
because it's as simple as, why aren't you willing your leg to
To work, to
this
heal.
compound fracture sticking out of the skin, like, I'm going to use self-determination to make it healed. But it's not that easy. It's more complicated than that.
Yeah, it's a lot more complicated. And with those 10 and 14 and 30-day paths, you're like taking somebody like part of the way across the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
They're terrified to go across it. There's
Yeah.
consequences to doing that. You're taking them part way across it, and then you're like, oh, see you later, good luck. And it's one of
Yeah.
those things, you in those short time frames, you may not even be past
Physical
the actual
withdrawals. Yeah.
physical withdrawals that can be detrimental to you,
Yeah.
detrimental to your health.
Yeah. And like I said, I think this particular topic impacts the veteran community
Hmm.
disproportionately, just because of the amount of physical pain that we have to manage. Like, I know, we're all the time, because we've known each other for so long. I've had like 3 surgeries at this point, and I know that you're fighting getting, having one done, but eventually it'll get you too.
One
Um,
day.
yeah, and most of the people that I have met that are prior service, they have at least one, let's just say, joint issue that is service connected.
Hmm.
So this is a kind of a topic that we're not going to really be able to get around within the veteran community.
Because
And
with
yeah,
the VA, they're gonna, what's their first thing gonna be? Well, let's throw a prescription at it. Let's, you know, if he's not talking about his mind, if he or she is not talking about their mind, what can we do to throw a answer at it real quick? Because it's the same way in the civilian world.
mhm. Yeah.
And
And I mean, and I understand that because these medications are remarkably effective at managing pain. They are.
in
The problem is they just
in the
grab
short
onto you.
term,
Yeah, they grab onto you so
hmm
quickly. Yeah.
these medications are really designed to be used in the short term.
Mm. Yeah.
And luckily now, not the greatest thing, but that's how the doctors are basing everything, and that's what their training is turned to, is to use these kind of medications in the short term
Mhm.
aspect of it, and to have a plan to help get them off of them.
Yeah.
That's and 5 years ago that wasn't, no doctor had any kind of plan, and now at least they're trying.
Yeah. So I think your experience within even the drug enforcement arena is a little different because you see the detrimental effects
Hmm.
that these drugs do to the people themselves. I know I can't tell you how many times I've been in your company and a family member has called
Hmm.
just needing some update about the death of their loved one.
Yeah.
So that really puts you right in the middle of it because you're dealing with the human suffering of this particular issue.
with
So
the with the
yeah,
leftovers of the broken families and
mhm,
broken hearts. And
yeah,
yeah, it's, they call all the time. Sometimes they just call because they need somebody to be mad at, and you just gotta kind of let
mhm,
them vent it out. Sometimes they just want to call you and cry. Sometimes they just want to call to talk, and there's not a whole lot you can do except
yeah,
just let them get it out. And that's the thing that a lot of the communities and the media and everything, that's the part you don't get to see, is what happens to that family who
mhm,
this was their only child, or this was
yeah,
their last chance, and this family had put so much into this person, and
mhm,
then they're gone, and then it's just
yeah,
left to the questions, and
yeah.
questions that a lot of people have no idea what the answer is.
Yeah. Especially since, because there is a roller coaster.
Hmm.
They'll get clean for a little while, but yet again, it's just there's not enough time in the inpatient facilities. And then they'll have a period of sobriety, and then it almost seems like that's the commonplace
Hmm.
where, or the prototype, if you will, that you get clean and then you get back to, you have a relapse, and that's the one that actually gets you.
Hmm. It's because before you were using this amount of the drug, whether it
Mhm.
was something that was prescribed to you or something that you're buying off the street,
Yeah.
you're using this amount, and then you get clean for a little while, and you go back and you're like, oh, well, I used to do that amount, so I should be good if I just do this much. And then
Right.
the next thing you
Yeah.
know, it ain't good. It
Yeah.
leads to your death. And then if you're buying it like illicit street drugs, you have no idea what's in there. And nowadays, it's everything has fentanyl in it, and it's not like fentanyl you get in the hospital when you have
Yeah.
surgery or something like that. It's fentanyl that's produced in another country in a lab somewhere and shipped in bulk to other
Mhm.
countries and then smuggled across our borders. It's not like you're getting the pharmaceutical grade of it. That's what a lot of people don't know, is you're getting this, all these scientists came up with this, and they're doing it in a lab in some third world country and then shipping it over
Mm.
here, making money on it.
Yeah. Is there any way of just by an eye test being able to discern whether or not there is fentanyl within the drug?
No, there's
No.
not. The only way that you could remotely be able to tell is if you're well versed in what the real pharmaceutical pill looks like as compared to what you may buy from a person off the street,
Yeah.
and you would have to be well versed in what that medication actually looks like when it comes from the pharmaceutical grade, and then compared to what you're getting on the street. So there's really no way for the average person to be able to tell
Yeah.
at all. That's something we receive training in, and you have to pay attention. You have to be able to reference material and look at photographs and things like that to be able to really tell.
Yeah, so there's no like, and that's things that you have material to reference.
Hmm.
Like obviously the layman is just buying something off the street. There's
Yep.
no way that they're going to be able to compare and contrast
Yeah.
between. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And we're like we were talking about earlier, you know, they get prescribed these pain pills, everything's going good. They cut them off of it. They used to not have a plan to help them get off of there. And then the person's like, well, I still got to have these. Well,
mm,
they're harder and harder to get from on the pharmaceutical side now. So that turns the person to the illicit street drug side.
yeah,
And that's where everything turns bad because you have no idea what you're getting.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. So how? I mean, in your training, how fast do they tell you that somebody can be grabbed by these drugs?
I mean, so part of that depends on the person, part of that
Mhm.
depends on the personality. You know, if they have an addictive personality starting off, it can be quick. You know, a person can start using these and within a week or two just be so used to that feeling of numbness or everything feels better or I don't have to deal with the world, things like that. And I mean, it can get a hold of them just that quick.
Yeah. Well, you know, I've heard so many people say, "I don't have an addictive personality." Oh, so what is that in your view? What is an addictive personality?
um, to me, it's, you know, if you smoke or you dip, I mean, let's just
Mhm.
look at it from the easiest way to compare it to anything.
Other
Hmm.
addictions.
Other
Okay.
addictions.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Mhm.
And if you can't do without those or not willing to put it down, even when it's detrimental to your health, then I mean, I think you could classify that as having somewhat of an addictive personality.
Right. Because that is true. Most people don't just wake up and say, "I think I'll use heroin today."
Nope.
Um, and
most most people
yeah,
get injured, get prescribed pills.
yeah,
Then when they come off of them, they still want them, and then when they can't afford the actual pharmaceutical ones, whether they're getting them through prescription or they're buying them from somebody else, you know, then they turn to whatever they can get to make them feel better. Because
yeah.
one of the things we didn't talk about was the the cycle of how everything goes when a person is addicted to an opioid and they're truly addicted where they're using every day multiple times a day. You got to think that every 3 to 4 hours the body is telling them like, hey, I
I
have to
need
have
more.
this,
Yeah,
I have to have this. And then they start feeling sick and they start having all those physiological responses
yeah,
to not having it. So I mean, you think about it that way. Every 3 to 4 hours, your body telling you, "Hey, I gotta have this. I gotta have this. I gotta have this." Willpower alone is not going to stop that.
yeah, yeah, for sure. Um, it's such a complicated um, it's such a complicated interaction. I don't really think people understand because I smoked for like 10 years,
Mm,
and giving up nicotine was one of the hardest things I ever did.
yeah,
I mean, it was really rough. I can't. I mean, how many of us in the uniform didn't
yeah,
smoke or dip, right?
yeah.
It was
25 years
yeah,
to give
and
up cigarettes. Yeah.
and you know what was weird for me too is I almost didn't even want to even approach it because that was such a social outlet. You would go, "Hey, let's go burn one. Let's go to the
Hmm.
smoke pit. Let's." Uh,
You're you're
yeah,
frustrated. You're tired. You're pissed. Whatever you can like. That was your opportunity to just unwind.
yeah.
Just go out there and burn one.
And so that brings me kind of to the next point: is your social circle can reinforce behaviors as
Hmm.
well.
That
And yeah,
that's one of the most important things when um, trying to get somebody help. We have some services available to us
mhm,
through the job and things like that, and then some services you just have to go out and find on your own, make phone calls, see who can help, see how they can get people transferred out to get help, things like that. And the one nice thing is we have a service that helps us out at my agency. I don't want to plug their name in there,
yeah,
but
no, that's
they
right. Yeah,
they do have specific programs for veterans,
yeah,
specific, and Nine times out of 10, it's no questions asked. If you want to go, they will get you there that
Mm.
night if possible.
Yeah.
And they can help arrange for transportation and things like that. But it's just, we try to offer whatever we can. And the people that I've seen succeed from this, come back from it, and have a normal life, and as normal as it can be,
Right.
um, are the people who change their social circles.
Yeah.
If you change that social circle into a more positive, a more healthy circle,
Yeah.
that in and of itself will help you through so much more than
Yeah.
just going trying to go to rehab or something like that. And because especially with that good social circle, you're not going to get stuck in that roundabout of, man, I'm just an addict and I'm not
Yeah.
worth anything and things like that. When you get in that healthier social circle, you're going to have that support channel that you need to be able to make it out of things like this.
Yeah. And whenever you're like going back to, let's just use cigarettes, being a smoker and hanging around other smokers makes it feel a
Hmm.
lot more normal.
Hmm.
Drugs are the same way. When you're hanging around people who are also using on a regular basis, it normalizes it. It
Hmm.
it it is so abnormal though. Like even like cigarettes, for example, we know how terrible smoking is for you, and yet when you're all doing it, it's almost like you just kind of suspend that off.
Hmm.
Like, nah, we're
Yeah.
not worried about that.
It's
Yeah,
it's either to it's easier to shrug off that, oh well, this isn't really the right thing to do, and it's like, oh well, look, we're all doing this
yeah,
together like one big family. It's okay. And
yeah.
yeah.
Because I used to work for the mental health court,
Hmm.
and that was one of the things that a lot of people would talk about is I feel so alone.
Hmm.
Now that I'm sober and I'm clean,
Yeah.
all the people that I used to hang out with just by proximity, because they either a legitimately don't want to be around you because they are trying to help you,
Hmm.
or b that's the only thing that they had in common was the use.
Hmm. It
You take
is.
that away and there's no common ground that they have with each other anymore.
Yeah. You look
Yeah,
at the people that transition out of the military and they get back to the civilian side, and at first they feel like, I have no one, I have no
hmm,
support, there's nothing here to help me out. And it's the same way, um, with being a recovering addict. It's just,
hmm,
you feel so alone, and you're trying to reestablish your new normal,
yeah,
and a lot of times people feel guilty for what they do and things like that. And sometimes they just don't want to accept that help of like a healthier social circle. But
yeah,
that's one of the things that by far will help them get through more.
yeah, yeah. That's an interesting comparison you just made, because that is the truth. When we get out of the uniform, and that's one of the things I harp on a lot here, is establishing new social capital, identifying with the veteran identity,
Hmm.
and then just seeking out relationships with people based upon that shared military experience. It makes things a lot easier to plug in with somebody if you have that shared background.
Hmm.
A
It
lot
is.
easier. That was one of the things that you and I just locked into step with,
Hmm.
was because it was, oh, you did that, oh, I was there, where were you, oh, okay, I was
Yeah.
down there, yeah. And it was just
You're
a
speaking the same
shorthand.
language.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So tell me, this law enforcement job that you do now, has this helped you kind of feel more connected to the community at large, to dare I say, whatever local place in which you were policing? Because this is something that you have to feel pretty passionately about,
Yeah.
because you see the effects every day as a part of your job.
Yeah. It's a lot different than just normal narcotics work. And it's, it's fulfilling because because you're talking to the victims' families and things like that.
Mm,
And then so when you take a case from where someone has overdosed and died, and you've done all your work and you've tracked all that down to the person who's selling this, they're in it for the money.
yeah,
They're not in it to care about what somebody feels, whether
Mhm.
they're a veteran or a civilian, or whether they were good or whether they're a bad person or anything like that. They're just in it for the money. And so with my job, it's like it gives you that new purpose, that new reason for doing what you do. And just like a service member, they come out, they're looking for their purpose. And
Mhm.
this this especially is like that new good purpose. Because you can get through this all the way and figure out who was responsible for it and who above them are responsible for it, and then you can put them into the judicial system and make it where
Yeah.
they have to be
Atone.
held
Yeah.
accountable,
Yeah.
yeah, for their actions. And
Yeah.
when you can go to that family and you can tell them like, hey, I'm very sorry that you had to go through this, but here's the person that's responsible, and we're
And we're
gonna
doing something about
yeah,
it.
we're doing
Yeah.
something about it. We're not just leaving you hanging. We don't want you to feel like your son or your daughter or your brother or your father or your mother or your sister or
Yeah.
your aunt, they weren't just a junkie, they were a person, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
because a lot of people, that's how they feel. And
Mhm.
people still have people still have rights and still deserve to be
Yeah.
treated like people, even if they have a problem. Because there's plenty of us that got problems and we still
Yeah.
get treated like normal people.
Yeah.
There's no reason you can't treat them like normal people and help
I,
out
ge-
their
I
families.
yeah, and I guess that kind of, I during my undergraduate, I had a minor within criminology, and they talk about a certain type of victim being less dead,
Hmm.
because society doesn't view them as having as much of a function, or that their
Hmm.
capital, their status is not as high as
Hmm.
other people. And so whenever somebody who is, maybe they're poor, maybe they're of a different racial background, when they die, they feel as if the system really does not care about them.
Hmm.
And I think that must be a breath of fresh air when they come across somebody like you that goes, no, I absolutely care. I'm working my ass off to
Hmm.
give you some sense of justice for the loss that your family is feeling.
Because
That has to be a pretty powerful message to deliver. Yeah.
people are still people, even if they have an addiction that they can't necessarily change or fix on their own.
Yeah.
They're still that son or that daughter, that's at family dinners and at Christmas and
Yeah.
at Thanksgiving and things like
Yeah.
that. They're still the ones that call their family up and tell them they love them. And they're still people. They're still part of a family.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially, with Thursday being Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
this has to be a time in which a lot of families in America right now, both our brothers and sisters in the uniform or just civilians, that have to be feeling that hole that
Mhm.
this problem has left in their dinner table.
Mhm. And it is, and it is. I mean, you see it more and more every day in the news. It's a problem that's not going to go away. It's not the first time we've had this epidemic happen.
Yeah.
This is technically it's the third one, but
Mm.
I mean,
Yeah.
a lot of big corporation had to do with it when they were pushing medication that they said, oh,
Mm.
you can't get addicted to this, and then they
Yeah.
just pushed it, and
Mm.
then once it was an epidemic, it was like, oh no, now what do we do? And nobody really had an answer for it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they're really still looking for the answer for it. It's just getting a little closer to something better every day.
Yeah. And something else that kind of is in my wheelhouse is, we call it co-occurring.
Hmm.
No one typically uses narcotics without having significant other mental health problems that
Hmm.
accompany it. I mean, otherwise, if you're just a well functioning person, like, that's standing upright in the world, the temptation or the allure to use heroin, for example, is is not really that likely. I'm not saying that it's not possible or that's impossible, but that's usually what happens. People are either battling depression or severe anxiety. They're self-medicating in a lot of ways when they first turn to some of these options to feel better. So I think that adds in just another big component to how we view, either, just the war on drugs generally, is these people are not just using in isolation, so to speak. They're having serious problems where other parts of the system are failing them, and that's where it kind of intersects, and it just complicates how it just makes it even more apparent that these people are not morally, broken. they have serious problems that they need professional help with.
And I mean, I would say, just to go along with that, talking about seeking treatment and things like that, my advice to anyone would be, if you're going into a situation where that you can be prescribed these things and whatnot, especially nowadays, they're not going to leave you on them forever. It's going to be short term, and you should help yourself out by putting yourself in that right mindset. Like, hey, it's going to hurt. They're going to give me this stuff to help, but this stuff isn't going to be around forever. And I don't want to put myself in that situation where I can be dependent on them. And understand that, hey, it's going to hurt. There's going to be pain afterwards. I'm going to treat it the best I can with safe methods, like over-the-counter medication, therapy stuff like heating, cooling, stuff like that. Put yourself in that right mindset when you know that could be coming down to you, especially if you're battling those things like you're talking about, depression, anxiety, things like that. It can be real easy to get caught up in that. Oh man, when I take this, man, everything else is good. Everything else goes away and things like that. But it's just like anything else. It's a temporary solution. It's not made to be a permanent solution.
And also, just to kind of go back to the mental health element, is when you're dealing with emotional content, it can reinforce pain. It can feel, it can have a physiological
effect,
component. And so, like, if you're depressed, for example, like, your whole body can kind of ache and feel as if there's a somatic component to it, meaning there is a physical, like, symptom that you're feeling. You may even feel sick, and it can all be related to your mental health situation. So it's almost like the two feed on each other. If you can do things to take care of your mental health, your physical health might improve, just because those two things are interacting in pretty complicated ways. And I think for our veteran community, that might be a huge element to it, is because we're so used to just tough it out. That's all right. Not that pain, rah, and there may be there's just the giant portion of the equation being our mental health that is even driving our physical pain or our physical symptoms, that if we just attended to that, just even for a little bit, we may have some physical gains too.
If you fix the mind, the body will follow. You might still have aches and pains and things like that, but if you fix the mind, the body will follow. Because I know that when I'm not in the right mindset, when I'm depressed or anxious or anything like that, I know that the physiological side of it is 10 times worse. I mean, I would have been the first one to tell you, like, no, I'm not talking to a shrink or anything else like that. I'm not crazy. And man, once I did, it was leaps and bounds better than anything else.
And it's ironic that you and I are so close. Yeah, I hope our chats have helped
Mhm.
helped to change your opinion of the mental health profession and what our motivations
Oh
are
yeah.
for. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I tell any veteran that's worried about that, just remember psychologist over psychiatrist. Like
Oh,
if
yeah,
you don't want to be medicated into oblivion, psychologist
yeah,
first. But
and,
you have to
yeah.
be willing to talk and think about it. That's the thing.
And that's one of the things also that I've tried to address in different episodes is mental health has this mysterious like
Mhm.
shroud around it. People think that there are these magical tests that we can give them to just predict everything about their life, or that a mental health professional will come in
Mhm.
and be able to strip them of their civil liberties, or
No.
um, that's not really the way it works. And so I hoped largely by having talks with like people like you
Mhm.
and some of the topics that we cover is that we just kind of lower the temperature around it, is take a little bit of the mystery out of it. And that,
Mhm.
because I think often it's what you don't know is so much more terrifying, is you just think that these are all the things you can go into catastrophizing about what you believe they're going to talk to you about or what they're going to do. And just having a little bit of information, a little bit of knowledge just completely drops the bottom out of it. You
Mhm.
know more of what to expect versus generating these expectations that are not accurate.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a little bit of knowledge helps quite,
Yeah.
quite a
Yeah.
bit. I, I wouldn't, because you know how I was like, no, no, no way.
Yeah.
No, I'll lose my
Yeah.
job. All this stuff will happen, yada, yada. And then,
Yeah.
man, it's totally not true.
Yeah,
Totally not
right.
true.
Yeah, because you get protections under the law. I mean, you should know that, obviously, that your civil liberties are ingrained in every part of your life. That you're not at any point, just because you go to a physician or to a mental health provider, you don't lose your civil liberties just because you seek care of any stripe.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
Is there anything else you wanted to cover, though?
Man, I think that
Yeah.
covers a, a little bit of everything. A
Yeah, yeah.
little bit of everything in
I
there.
mean, I think we went into some topics I don't think either one of us were thought we were going to go, but
Yeah, yeah, but maybe if they see, like what goes along with your show, if you see other veterans going, "Hey, it's okay," like
yeah,
it's not the end of the world. Trust
yeah,
me. Like
yeah,
I mean, sometimes things are just going to change, and sometimes you just need a little bit of help to get right back on the right
yeah,
path.
yeah.
So,
Well, I appreciate you coming on and talking, sharing a little bit with us about what you do, because I think that's another part maybe where we could benefit from having a little bit of knowledge, because
mhm,
so much within the law enforcement arena, people want to kind of have these absolutes about what these type of people are.
mhm,
But when you hear somebody have a legitimate care and concern about the people in which they are policing, it kind of puts things into perspective, that this is not all adversarial,
mhm,
that behind the badge there are lots of people
mhm.
who legitimately care about what they're doing and the ramifications that their job has in other people's lives.
Yeah, and when it
Yeah.
comes down to it, people just want to be treated like people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
So if anybody out there feels as if they could benefit from hearing this conversation, or knows somebody that they know could benefit from hearing this content, please refer them, spread the word. We're trying to change a little bit about the culture and lower stigma and lift up positive voices from our veteran community, so that they can take the forefront in the life after the uniform dilemma. So I can't do this by myself, and I know Jamie, he can't do it by himself. We all are in this together, as the old saying goes: "One team, one fight." So if you guys need any other content generated that you feel like would be beneficial to the veteran community, please reach out. Let me know. I would love to find a way of generating some content on a topic of your choice. But as always, however life finds you, I hope life finds you well. Till next.